Welcome to Damn Good Movie Memories with your host, Brian Davis. This podcast is the cure for your long commute and super boring workday. Hey there, it's Brian Davis, and for this week's episode, we're going to cover the movie The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes from 1939. The studio's 20th Century Fox release date was September 1st, 1939. The running time, 81 minutes, and it was in black and white. Leonard Maltin from his Classic Movie Guide gives it 3.5 out of 4 stars. He writes, the Master Sleuth faces one of his greatest challenges when the nefarious Professor Moriarty, played by George Zucco, plots to steal the crown jewels. The second and last of Fox's excellent Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce period pieces, which predated Universal's entertaining modern series for the remaining 12 entries. As I mentioned on the Hound of Baskerville's episode, which was episode 182, I own a terrific box set which includes all of the Rathbone and Bruce films from the 1940s. It's well worth your time and wallet if you want to pick up this set. However, you can find most of the films on YouTube for free as well if you're not a collector. Alright, let's get into the making of the film. So I really didn't touch upon it in the Hound of Baskerville's episode, but the legend is that Basil Rathbone was picked to play Sherlock Holmes in the film series because 20th Century Fox studio head Darryl F. Zanuck had met Rathbone at a cocktail party and had mentioned to Rathbone that he would be perfect to play the Holmes character. The rest is history. After the success of Baskerville's, it was Fox's plan to release one Holmes film a year for as long as the series was successful at the box office. However, there was a 3-year hiatus before the next film in 1942 due to complaints from British audiences that the film was too Americanized, along with the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle estate, who only wanted the films to be based on the actual novels. Suffice to say, the 1-year plan was scrapped, and new films were sometimes released as many as 3 times in a given year, like in 1943, 44, and 45. Even though the film is supposed to be an adaptation of the play from 1889 written by William Gillette, the vast majority of the film differs from the play. Lionel Atwill was originally cast to play Professor Moriarty, but he was replaced before shooting by George Zucco. However, Atwill would go on to play Moriarty in the 1942 film Sherlock Holmes and the Secret Weapon. Alright, let's get into the film. So it opens with a hand opening up a book, and it's the journal and or novel of Sherlock Holmes, which surmises that the only person that he calls the genius of evil is Professor Moriarty, who has eluded Holmes' capture for 11 years. He is the most dangerous criminal Holmes has ever known. We are then taken to a courtroom where Moriarty, played by George Zucco, is on trial for murder, but he is acquitted due to the lack of evidence. The judge is not pleased with the jury's ruling before Holmes and Watson enter the courtroom unannounced with new evidence.
You have heard the verdict. Under the law, no other verdict is possible. Yet it is undoubtedly a gross miscarriage of justice. It is deplorable, Professor Moriarty, that a man of your intellectual attainments should be standing in the prisoner's dock charged with the crime of murder, and then setting you free, I cannot in my conscience exonerate you. Let the prisoner be discharged.
My Lord, I have important new evidence.
You come too late, Mr. Holmes. The prisoner has been discharged.
But, my lord, you can't let Moriarty go free. He killed Lorraine. I can prove it. I can destroy his alibi.
That alibi has been established by 300 fellows of the Royal Society. Your Lordship, my client has been acquitted. He cannot be tried twice on the same charge.
Well, there you are, Holmes. I'm afraid you have a bad opinion of me.
On the contrary, I hold you in the highest esteem, but only as a knave.
It's gratifying to know that one's talents are appreciated by such a distinguished connoisseur. May I give you a lift? Cabs are scarce in this rain.
Thank you.
"221 Baker Street, first.
Very good, sir.
After you, my dear Holmes.
By no means. I prefer that you precede me at all times.
What a creature of habit you are.
You've a magnificent brain, Moriarty. I admire it. I admire it so much I'd like to present it pickled in alcohol to the London Medical Society.
That would make an interesting exhibit. Holmes, you've only now barely missed sending me to the gallows. You're the one man in England clever enough to defeat me. The situation has become impossible.
Have you any suggestions?
I'm going to break you, Holmes. I'm going to bring off right under your nose the most incredible crime of the century, and you'll never suspect it until it's too late. That will be the end of you, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. And when I've beaten and ruined you, then I can retire in peace. I'd like to retire. Crime no longer amuses me. I'd like to devote my remaining years to abstract science.
Well, here we are at my lodgings. I'm so sorry I can't ask you in. Good night, Professor Moriarty.
Good night.
And you have the ultimate showdown between a master criminal mind versus the best detective. Moriarty discusses his plans for Holmes when his associate named Basil visits him.
Well, Basil?
Don't that bloke never stop? That music gives me the creeps.
Does it, Basil? I rather like it. I want you to post that letter in the box at Portland Square just a few minutes before 12. Then drive directly to your lodgings by way of Oxford Circus. Wait there till I send for you. That's all.
First, I want to know what I'm a-getting into.
You have your orders, that's enough.
I've got a right to know the layout in case there's trouble.
I'll take care of that.
That's what you promised Higgins in that Hammersmith job.
Oh, poor Higgins. They found nothing but his boots.
One boot?
You know, Basil, Higgins was a valuable man and a clever cracksman. But he had your unfortunate habit of asking too many questions. And now all that's left of him is one boot.
Don't take me wrong, Professor. I'll do what you tell me right enough.
I'm sure you will, Basil. And just to prove how I trust you, I'm going to tell you my plan, although you haven't the imagination to appreciate its subtlety. My whole success depends upon a peculiarity of Holmes' brain. Its perpetual restlessness. Its constant struggle to escape boredom.
Holmes again?
Always Holmes until the end. He's like a spoiled boy who picks watches to pieces, but loses interest in one toy as soon as he's given another. So I'm presenting the ingenious but fickle Mr. Holmes with two toys, in the order in which I mean him to have them. The first, that letter. And if I know Mr. Holmes, that will interest him very little. After this comes to fascinate and tantalize his imagination.
Blimey, what's it mean?
That is what I'm depending upon to absorb Mr. Holmes' interest when I'm engaged elsewhere. I'll give him a toy to delight his heart, so full of bizarre complications that he'll forget all about the first toy, that letter.
What's in the letter, Professor?
The germ of a crime, Basil. A truly great crime. A crime that will stir the empire, that children will read about in their history books. And you're going to be part of it, Basil. Off with you now.
In addition to the written letter, Moriarty drew a quick caricature of a man with what looks like a bird protruding from his chest. Now, the drawing is simply a red herring, as Moriarty mentioned, to throw Holmes off his trail while he commits the actual crime. Meanwhile, at Holmes's house, Watson, played by Nigel Bruce, pays him a visit, and Holmes discusses the letter he's received.
I trust I don't come inopportunely.
My dear fellow, as if you ever could. Come on, pull up a chair. As a matter of fact, you're just in time to help me decide a matter which is certainly delicate and possibly of the gravest importance.
Of course. Anything I can do.
I received this note last night. My dear Mr. Holmes, I'm taking the liberty of calling on you at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's very soon now. To ask you what may appear a silly question, whether or not I should go to a garden party on Saturday at Lady Conningham's. I beg you to see me. I'm in desperate need of advice. Sincerely yours, Anne Brandon. What do you make of it, Watson?
Somebody's pulling your leg.
No. I've checked on the young lady. She lives in town with her brother. She's very rich, mining fortune. Her father died somewhat mysteriously about 10 years ago. As for Miss Brandon's dilemma, Lady Conyngham is eminently respectable, but she gives the kind of parties that one comes away from with a feeling that one hasn't been anywhere.
Well, how can you trifle with such inconsequentialities when Moriarty's loose on London?
My dear Watson, you astound me. It's the very inconsequentialities of Miss Brandon's message that engages my interest.
But Moriarty, what of him?
I've taken the most efficient steps of keeping in touch with Moriarty.
You're having him followed.
Oh, don't be so crude, Watson.
Oh, what are you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing?
My dear Watson, you needn't check me back as if I were an invoice. I said nothing. That's the best thing I can possibly do at the moment. Moriarty's as curious about my movements as I am about his. So I sit here and wait for him to come to me. And he'll come. Never doubt it.
So you fiddle while Rome burns?
A daring metaphor, Watson.
And what are you doing with that infernal fiddle? And those flies?
I was observing the reaction on the common housefly at the chromatic scale.
A brilliant experiment.
Yes, it will be. If I can find the note that annoys the housefly.
Huh?
Then one need only play that one note and psst, all the houseflies disappear.
Amazing.
No. Elementary, my dear Watson. Purely elementary.
I expect that'll be the young lady.
On the contrary, I suggest an elderly gentleman. Perhaps a touch of gout in his right leg. Sir Ronald, I'm delighted to see you.
How do you do, Holmes?
Maybe take your hat and stick.
Thank you, yes.
I don't think you know Dr. Watson, do you? Watson, this is Sir Ronald Ramsgate, Constable of the Tower of London, where all he has to do is to keep his eyes on the crown jewels.
How do you do, sir?
Holmes has often spoken of you, Dr. Watson.
You haven't dropped in like this for a long time, Sir Ronald. Won't you sit down, have a cup of tea?
Thank you. No. I've come to consult you on a rather peculiar matter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just have a look at that. Doesn't it strike you that the handwriting is...
Yes. That's because it's written with the left hand. Star of Delhi will never reach the Tower of London. Curious and anonymous.
What is the Star of Delhi?
Probably the largest emerald in the world. A gift to Her Majesty from the Maharaja of Raipur.
Oh, I shouldn't worry about this, Sir Ronald. A typical crank letter, besides no professional thief, would risk stealing so famous an emerald. He can't break it up. He certainly couldn't sell it as it is.
Perhaps not, but in my position of trust, I can't afford to take any chances. I wonder whether you could possibly manage to be on hand when the jewel is delivered.
Now, when will that be?
This weekend. It's coming on the cruiser Invincible.
Well, Sir Ronald, even though I'm convinced that the threat means nothing and that a routine police guard will be quite adequate, you can depend on me.
Thank you. Now I feel sure the jewel will be safe.
Little enough to do for you, Sir Ronald.
Excuse me. I don't know what you must think of me, but I'm sure I was followed here.
You are Miss Brandon?
Yes.
I'm Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, I know.
Let me introduce you to my associate, Dr. Watson.
How do you do?
Sir Ronald Ramsgate.
Mr. Holmes,
Well, I got what I wanted, so I think I'll be going along. Good day, Miss Brandon. Goodbye, Doctor.
Goodbye, sir.
Your hat and stick, Sir Ronald.
Thank you. I'm depending on you.
I'll not fail you.
I'm sure of that.
Goodbye, sir.
Goodbye.
Yes, Miss Brandon?
why, I shouldn't have written you as I did, Mr. Holmes, and then burst in this melodramatic way. But I had to see you.
Oh, that doesn't matter, Miss Brandon. There's no more resolutely informal household in all London than mine.
You're very kind.
Not at all. Only I don't understand why you wish to consult me about a garden party. You couldn't possibly find a worse guide to social etiquette.
It's because my brother and Gerald Hunter, he's the family solicitor, insist on my going. And I don't want to. I don't want to.
Yes, but how should I know how to advise you, Miss Brandon?
Perhaps you should do as your brother and family solicitor suggest. Lady Conyngham is eminently respectable.
No. Oh, Mr. Holmes, I'm so frightened.
What are you frightened of, Miss Brandon?
Murder.
Sit down, Miss Brandon. Now, suppose you tell us all about it.
Well, this came from my brother Lloyd in the post 2 days ago.
There seems to be a field day for crank messages. Look at that, Watson.
Curious.
May the 11th. That's today.
My father received just such a note before he was murdered.
Murdered?
Murdered. 10 years ago on May the 11th. Scotland Yard couldn't make anything of it. But I saw him. My father, lying there on the pavement, with the back of his head all.
Now tell me, Miss Brandon, do you associate May the 11th with anything else besides your father's death? I mean, perhaps with some other incident in your family history?
No, nothing. My family has no history. My father was a self-made man.
I see.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, you must save my brother. Don't let them kill him as they did my father. Gerald.
It was very wrong of you to come here, Anne, after I expressly asked you not to.
No more so than for you to follow me.
Where's the paper you took off my desk?
Here in my hand. And I'll keep it until I find out what it means.
I apologize for the intrusion, gentlemen. My name is Hunter. I'm the legal representative for Miss Brandon's brother. That note was placed confidentially in my keeping. It's of no concern to anybody except Mr. Brandon and myself.
Murder is the concern of every right-minded person, Mr. Hunter.
You make too much of a trifle.
There's nothing trifling about murder. Miss Brandon fears destroying may be a threat.
She's been reading too many novels. It's merely some kind of joke or the work of a mental incompetent.
Isn't it true, Mr. Hunter, that Miss Brandon's father received such a drawing before he was killed?
Since my client attaches no significance to that, Mr. Holmes, I don't see why you should. It's pure coincidence.
Yes. But it would be unfortunate if the coincidence turned into a tragedy, wouldn't it?
That is our responsibility, Mr. Holmes. I regret that you've been troubled. I'll send you a check for your fee.
As yet there is no fee. I haven't accepted the case.
You see, Anne, you've only made yourself ridiculous.
Well, if Mr. Holmes won't help me, I'll go to Scotland Yard.
Won't you trust me, Anne?
But, Gerald, there's too much at stake. My brother's life.
Darling, you must trust me. If you don't, what's to happen to us?
I don't know, Gerald. I daren't think.
I've decided to accept your case, Miss Brandon. I shall help you all I can.
Oh, thank you.
We don't want your interference, Mr. Holmes.
I interfere whenever and wherever I like, Mr. Hunter.
I think you'd better go, Gerald.
Come with me.
No.
Very well, if that's how you want it. Good day, gentlemen.
Have I been very foolish, Mr. Holmes?
I don't think so. Now, keep that note.
Yes, of course.
Struck me that Mr. Hunter behaved rather curiously.
Yes. He's my fiancé.
I understand that. You've no idea what kind of bird this is supposed to be, have you?
I don't know anything about birds.
I notice that it isn't just a bird. It's a definite kind of bird. I think it belongs to the Procellariform family. I shall go to the Kensington Museum and look him up. I should like you to come with me, Miss Brandon.
Oh, yes. Yes, of course. Anything you say.
Come in, Billy.
Yes, Mr. Holmes?
Oh, Billy, I'd be obliged if you take this young lady down to Mrs. Hudson and give her a cup of tea.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Then, Billy, I want you to get me a cab.
I know, sir. Not the first, not the second cab in the line, but the third.
Well, I don't think that precaution will be necessary in this case, but use your own judgment.
Yes, sir.
And by the way, Billy.
Yes, sir.
When you found that cab, you might remove the dust that you kicked under the rug on the landing. Billy's starting to take over my duties when I retire, Miss Brandon. I'll join you below in just a few minutes.
I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Please don't try.
Holmes, you can't get involved in this case. Your duty is to guard the Star of Delhi.
What? Oh, bother the Star of Delhi.
What?
Here's a case where a man's life may be involved. And there's something grotesque about this business. The young Hunter knows a great deal more than he proposes to tell. Find out what you can about it, will you, Watson, and report to me at the museum.
It's time for lunch.
Lunch? One can have lunch any time. Oh, go on, Watson. Please, hurry up.
As you heard from the last clip, Holmes said one of his most famous lines, which was made popular by this specific film, Elementary, my dear Watson. Interestingly enough, this famous line was never in the novels that were written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Also in the last clip, we met Anne Brandon, that's Ida Lupino, who received the sketch made by Moriarty, along with Gerald Hunter, that's played by Alan Marshall. He's the lawyer for Anne's brother Lloyd and also her fiancé. As with all of the Sherlock Holmes films with Basil Rathbone, there's always humor mixed in with the tension and mystery. Watson does some recon work investigating Gerald and sees Moriarty leaving Gerald's office. Elsewhere, Holmes and Anne research the bird that was drawn in the sketch she received.
See? The beak, the nostrils. The whole formation of the body is the same. In sea law, the companion of ships and the good omen of honest mariners, but an angel of destruction to those who do him ill. The albatross.
It looks the same. I wonder what it means.
Are you certain that the albatross doesn't suggest some memory, some association with your family? Think.
I am thinking. No, the only thing it reminds me of is the poem. Water, water everywhere. And all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere. Nor any drop to drink.
You've hit on it. And instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. This is no childish prank, Miss Brandon, but a cryptic warning of avenging death. We must go to your brother at once.
Holmes!
Holmes! Come along, Watson, quick.
But Holmes, this is important.
Well, Watson, you're bursting with news. What is it, man? Speak up. We've no secrets from Miss Brandon.
Moriarty.
I knew it. What have you found out, Watson?
That fellow Hunter's working with Moriarty. They were together in Hunter's office. I watched Moriarty leave.
Excellent. And what did Mr. Hunter do then?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Oh, I came away directly to tell you what I discovered. Well, have I done something wrong?
I hope not. I particularly wanted Mr. Hunter's movements kept in view today.
Sorry?
Mr. Holmes,
Yes, Miss Brandon?
regardless of appearances, don't condemn Gerald too quickly. I know he's keeping some secret from me, but he could never do anything vicious, I'm sure of it.
I trust you're right, Miss Brandon, but we must be on our guard.
But I was going to say, Holmes, that...
Well, what were you about to say, Watson?
Nothing.
Watson?
Yes?
I'm afraid you're an incorrigible bungler.
Well,
Oh, Mr. Holmes, I wish he could go faster.
He's going as fast as he can, my dear.
We then see Lloyd being followed by Gerald, and following both of them is Bassett. Lloyd is found dead in a park after his skull was crushed. Holmes and Watson take Anne home, and Holmes talks to Inspector Bristol from Scotland Yard, who is already questioning Gerald.
Oh, it's you, Mr. Holmes. How do you come to be here?
I just happened to be passing. I know the family. How are you, Mr. Hunter? And you, Inspector?
I don't know how much you know about this business, Mr. Holmes, but this time, I'm a little bit ahead of you.
Excellent, Bristol. Then you've already solved the crime?
I found the murderer.
Yes, but that's not quite the same thing, you know.
I didn't kill Lloyd Brandon.
Has anyone said you did?
Oh, it's plain enough what's in the inspector's mind. And he's wrong. While he's wasted time badgering me, the murderer's got away.
Well, if you're so anxious to save my time, supposing you explain how you came to be found bending over the corpse with this in your hand, and him with his head bashed in. Well, if you won't talk, I'm going to hold you on suspicion of murder.
I didn't kill him, I tell you.
You clubbed him to death with the butt end of this revolver from behind.
I wouldn't go too far along that line, Inspector.
And what would you propose that I should do, Mr. Holmes?
Find the murderer.
What? If that man didn't club Lloyd Brandon to death, who did?
Nobody.
What?
Brandon was strangled to death.
Strangled?
Yes. The wounds on the back of his head were administered post-mortem.
Are you sure of that, Mr. Holmes?
Absolutely. Talk to the medical examiner if you have any doubts.
You wait here.
How do you know he was strangled?
The marks were on the neck. Cigarette, Mr. Hunter?
No, thanks.
So that blow on the back of the neck becomes an interesting element. It was unnecessary, therefore vicious. Intelligent criminals are seldom vicious except on special occasions. Though the apparent method of the crime was brutal, I'm convinced that the crime itself was intelligently planned.
And Bristol thinks I did that.
The nose of the police dog, although long and efficient, points in only one direction at a time.
What do you mean?
Simply that you're the obvious suspect.
It's so ridiculous. Why should I want to kill him?
You should know that better than anyone else, Mr. Hunter. You're his lawyer, you manage the estate.
You'll have to explain that, Mr. Holmes.
The Brandon estate is quite considerable. Miss Anne inherits, and you're about to marry Miss Anne.
Why, you...
I was merely demonstrating how the police mind works. Yes, I'm afraid our friend the inspector has quite set his heart on arresting you.
Arresting me? Oh, you mustn't allow them to do that, Mr. Holmes. I must be left free to protect Anne.
From what, Gerald? Answer me.
Anne, I'm sorry.
First they murdered my father, and now they've murdered Lloyd. Do they want to kill me, too?
I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. I did my best to guard him day and night, yet they found him all the same. There in an empty street. Oh, I may have lost him for a moment, but I couldn't have been far behind.
Who are they? Gerald, you're lying. You've been lying all the time. You knew from the first that note was a real threat. That's why you tried to send me away, why you followed Lloyd. Oh, Jerry, if you know who killed him, why won't you tell us? Why won't you tell us everything?
I'll tell you why. I've been watching you, Mr. Hunter, and I found out
What have you found out, Dr. Watson?
Whatever Watson has found out, you'll know inevitably. I have unbounded confidence in his lack of discretion. Meanwhile, time presses, and we've work to do outside before it gets too late.
Mr. Holmes.
Excuse us.
You pushed me out of the room as if I were a child. What am I to make of this, Holmes?
Anything but such a petulant-faced old fellow. Come along.
In another moment, I would have made you confess about Moriarty.
That's exactly what I didn't want. If Moriarty's behind this case, Hunter will lead us to him.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, I was just coming to find you, sir.
Have you seen the body?
He was strangled to death, sir, just as you and I thought. So now I'm going to arrest this fellow Hunter, take him down to the yard. I can really question him there. And I thought perhaps you'd like to come along, sir.
No, I think not, Inspector. Dr. Watson and I are going across the way to take a look at the scene of the crime.
You'll be wasting your time, sir. My men have already covered the ground.
Well, we'll just take a look all the same. Incidentally, Inspector, if I were you, I shouldn't arrest Mr. Hunter. In any case, not now. And I shouldn't question him any further.
Why not?
Well, it won't get us anywhere. He won't talk until he's ready. And anyhow, you haven't a case against him yet. Why not leave him at large? Have him watched and see what happens. For a day or two at least. You've always found my advice pretty sound, haven't you, Inspector? And it's got you a lot of attention in the newspapers.
Then you'll work on the case, sir? In the usual way?
In the usual way, Inspector.
I'll do as you suggest, sir.
Good. Come along, Watson.
Come in.
Oh, Mr. Hunter, we shan't be wanting you any longer. You're free to go whenever you like.
Thank you, Inspector. You see, darling, they don't think anything of the kind. Anne, you must believe.
Oh, I don't know what to believe in now that Lloyd's gone. If I can't believe in you, Gerald, there's nothing in the whole world I can believe in or count on.
Dearest.
But if you knew Lloyd was in danger, why did you try to keep me from seeing Sherlock Holmes? Why did you follow Lloyd with a revolver in your pocket? Makes me afraid sometimes even of you.
Darling, how can you say such a thing?
Oh, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm so tired and confused.
Holmes always has a way to convince those that need convincing. In the case of the inspector, good press goes a long way. Holmes and Watson investigate the crime scene, and of course, Holmes discovers a few vital clues.
What have you found, Holmes? Footprints?
Yes. A club-footed man, about 5'11", I should say, from the length of his stride. Do you observe anything singular about these footprints, Watson?
I can't say that I do.
Club-footed people invariably bring their full weight down on the toe. If you look closely, you'll observe that the weight of the man who made these footprints is normally balanced from toe to heel.
What do you make of that, Holmes?
Oh, just one more unnatural element in this rather peculiar case. The clubfoot must have some other compensating deformity to explain these footprints.
What? You think these are the footprints of a murderer?
It's possible. Yes. Yes, it's quite possible.
What, Holmes?
Well, a man standing just about here would command a view of the path. He might project some kind of weapon.
But no other weapon's been found except Hunter's revolver.
It could easily have been retrieved in the excitement.
But what kind of weapon thrown from here could both strangle a man and crush his skull in?
If we knew that, my dear Watson, we'd be a great deal nearer to the solution of the crime. Look at that. Yes. Yes, that was torn from that tree. Perhaps by something hurtling past. The sap's not dry yet. That means it was torn off within the last few hours. Ah.
What have you found, Holmes? It's a watch fob. Looks like a rabbit's foot.
No, it's chinchilla. Unquestionably chinchilla.
Well, rabbit or chinchilla, what's it matter?
What? No, perhaps it doesn't matter at all, Watson. We'll see.
I've always thought those things in very poor taste. Fancy going about with a dead animal's foot dangling from your pocket.
Yes, and then losing it at the scene of the murder. Very careless.
All right, there's about 30 minutes left and plenty of more clues and mystery for Holmes and Watson to uncover. However, is all of it just a charade to keep both men off the track of the real crime being committed as Moriarty planned early on in this film? You're just going to have to watch and find out. The 14 films starring Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce truly are a delight. They are very well done and very quickly paced, and they're easy to follow and always have humor mixed in. The typecasting of Rathbone and Bruce was spot on as both actors portrayed the characters perfectly. For me, they are the quintessential Holmes and Watson on film. Alright, some fun facts. So the original play, which the film was supposedly based on, featured a very young Charlie Chaplin who played the role of Billy, who works for Holmes as an errand boy. It was the stage debut for Chaplin. This is the last time Basil Rathbone would wear the famous deerstalker hat and cape in the 14 Holmes films, though you can always see the hat hanging on the hat stand in the early Universal Holmes films. The film actually revived the faltered career of Ida Lupino, whose Hollywood roles were dwindling. It was in fact a radio performance on Orson Welles' Mercury Theater of the Air that actually brought her to the attention of a Fox casting agent who was impressed with her clear voice and mid-Atlantic delivery. Speaking of radio, in addition to the 14 films, Rathbone and Bruce also had a radio show featuring their famous roles from 1939 to 1946. So let's play one of those episodes now, from January 7th, 1946, called The Strange Case of the Murderer in Wax. Enjoy this, and then I'll be back next week to talk about yet another random movie from my DVD collection.
This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. Tonight, instead of joining the doctor at his home, we're all meeting here at Camp Roberts in California, where the doctor's going to tell his story before a large audience of GIs, and as usual, I'm going to tell my story right now. It's about Petri California Sherry. And I want you to know that Petri Sherry is the best beginning a good meal ever had. Before you sit down to dinner some evening soon, just pour yourself a glass of Petri Sherry. Look at that rich, dark amber color. Just smell the fragrance of those wonderful grapes. And then taste that Petri Sherry. Is that ever good? And say, if you like your sherry on the dry side, you know, not sweet, then just wait till you taste Petri Pale Dry Sherry. If some of the family like regular sherry and some like pale dry, Don't buy one, buy two. You can't go wrong so long as you buy Petri. Petri. Petri Sherry. And now let's join Dr. Watson and get on with our story.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell.
Well, Doctor, your study seems a little bigger than usual this week.
Yes, my boy. I felt that as tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure was rather an exciting one, the men here at Camp Roberts might like me to tell it to them in person.
I'm sure they will, Doctor. Which particular story have you selected?
One that I call The Strange Case of the Murder in Wax. It concerns one of the most sinister mass murderers who ever threatened the peace of London. It was in the summer of 1900, and the city had been rocked by a series of ghastly murders on Hampstead Heath.
Hampstead Heath?
Yes, Hampstead Heath. That's a large rambling park in the suburbs of London, Mr. Bartell, and noted as a rendezvous for young lovers. It was here that the elusive murderer, knife in hand, was wont to roam at night time, searching for his prey. All of his victims were young girls, and despite the frantic efforts of the police, each murder seemed to be as baffling as the one that preceded. Finally, of course, as usual, Scotland Yard came to Sherlock Holmes for help. It seems almost like yesterday, Mr. Bartell, that Inspector Lestrade stood in our Baker Street rooms, imploring Holmes to handle the case.
Mr. Holmes, you've got to help us. I don't mind telling you the yard's at the end of its rope.
I sympathize with you, Lestrade, but I don't see that there's much that I can do. Only the police can handle the widespread, detailed work necessary to this case. The private detective is helpless.
Yes, perhaps if you'd come to Mr. Holmes in the first place, Lestrade, he might have helped you.
But the murderer hasn't finished yet. There'll be more killings if we don't catch him, you mark my words. Mr. Holmes, please help us, won't you?
Before I commit myself, Lestrade, give me the exact chronology of events, will you? All my information on the murders has been derived from the London newspapers, notoriously inaccurate in matters of fact.
I can give you all the particulars, sir. I've been on the case right from the beginning. All the murders have taken place on Hampstead Heath at night time, and all the victims have been young women.
Who was the first one?
A girl by the name of Oakley, Bessie Oakley. She was a shop girl who worked at Derry and Tom's in Kensington High Street. 3 weeks ago, she was out on the heath with a young fella by the name of Alfred Smith. From what he told me, it was a moonlight night that night as they sat there out on the heath.
Come on, Bessie, give us a kiss.
Oh, go on, Fred. Don't be so soppy.
I ain't sloppy. Come on, Bess.
Hello. Who's this coming towards us?
Bloomin' prowler. Here, you, what you want?
Can't you say something?
Look out, Bessie's got a knife. No, you don't.
Devil, you hit my Fred. Keep away from me. Keep away from me, you.
And that's all I know, Inspector Lestrade. I never got a good look at him. He caught me on the head, and when I come to, there was poor Bessie with her throat cut.
Yeah, that's your story, young fella, my lad. All right, Sergeant. You can book him on suspicion of murder.
Sir George, we shouldn't be walking on the heath. Didn't you read about the murder here 2 days ago?
It's a fine thing. I take you out in the moonlight, and you talk of murders. Let's talk about us, Violet, darling.
It seems to me we should talk about your wife.
My wife doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Violet, if I could get a divorce,
There's someone behind that tree. He's coming towards us.
Who are you, son? What do you... No, you don't.
Don't come near me. Don't.
Inspector Lestrade, she's dead, poor girl, I know, but a scandal can't bring her back. If there's any way to keep my name out of the papers,
Yeah, I'm afraid you'll have to take your chances, Sir George. Oh, and Sergeant.
Yes, Inspector?
You can turn that boy loose, Weevil, for questioning. The man who did this is obviously the same killer. I'm afraid we're going to hear a lot more from him.
Light edition evening paper. Hampstead Heath murderous strikes for fifth time. 9 girls murdered on Hampstead Heath. Light edition evening paper here.
Now, look here, miss. You can't go walking by yourself on the heath. It ain't safe.
Oh, thank you, Constable, but I'm not frightened. I want to be by myself, and I want to think.
Well, I can't stop you by law, I suppose, but you shouldn't do it. Yeah. I don't know how to handle these modern young things, and that's a fact. Lestrade, he must have killed her the moment she got out of my sight. I searched the old ruddy heath, but I couldn't find the murderer. But it did startle him. He left his knife in the body.
Good, Jackson. The body's not been identified yet, eh?
No, Inspector.
We'll print her photograph in all the papers. We've got to find out who she is. Mr. Bishop, is this the body of your missing daughter?
Yes, it's Rosie, my Rose. Inspector Lestrade, if I ever lay my hands on that murdering fiend, I'll kill him. I'll kill him with my bare hands.
Here's the story, Mr. Holmes. Rose Bishop was the 10th and last girl murdered.
But she was the first girl murdered when she was alone, eh, Lestrade?
Yes, sir.
You found no clues?
Well, none that proved anything when we checked on them.
Let me ask you a question or two, Lestrade.
Well, anything you like, sir.
You've taken the obvious precautions, of course.
Oh, how do you mean?
You posted a heavy police guard on the heath?
Why, yes, sir. We've had 100 plainclothesmen walking there at night ever since the second murder. But he seems to slip through our fingers.
I suppose you've also posted policemen dressed in women's clothes.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. And we've hired girls to walk the heath in couples with our plainclothesmen. But the murderer won't seem to rise to our bait.
He's a cunning brute.
Yes, he is, Watson. Obviously a morbid madman obsessed by a hatred of love. It'll be hard to catch. Lestrade, you mentioned clues that amounted to nothing when you checked them. What were these clues?
Well, footprints, a couple of cigarette butts dropped at the scene of the crime. Nothing that helped us. The only important clue was the knife we found in the body of Rose Bishop, the last girl murdered.
Of course, the experts at the yard examined it.
Yes, sir. Didn't tell us a thing, though.
You have the knife with you?
Here it is, Mr. Holmes. I knew you wouldn't trust us. You'd want to look at it yourself.
Thank you, Lestrade. Yes. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
What is it, Holmes?
This knife is a collector's item. It's at least 100 years old, I should say. May I keep this overnight, Lestrade? I should like to conduct a few experiments of my own.
Why, of course you can, sir.
Then you're going to take on the case, Holmes?
Now, let us say that I'll take it under advisement. I'll do my best, Lestrade. I'll do my best.
Well, thank you, sir.
If any further developments occur, communicate with me at once, will you?
Yes, sir.
In the meanwhile, I'll smoke a few pipes on the problem. But I promise nothing, my dear fellow. I promise absolutely nothing.
3 o'clock in the morning, Holmes. You're still peering through your microscope at that knife Lestrade left with you.
That's true, old chap. That's quite true. You must be a very dull companion. Why don't you go to bed?
Oh, because I'm afraid I may miss something. Confound it. Have you discovered anything?
Yes, I think so.
Oh, what?
The handle of this knife is corrugated. On the underside, I observed a slight diffusion in the markings. Under the penetrating eye of the microscope, I found a minute deposit which had caused the diffusion. I have just analyzed that deposit. It's wax, colored wax.
Colored wax? Well, what does that signify?
Oh, by itself, very little. But when you combine it with a knife that definitely belongs to another century, it does suggest a certain origin.
I got an idea. Perhaps it came from the theater. An 18th century dagger could belong in a period play. And the colored wax might easily be part of an actor's makeup.
Excellent deduction, Watson.
Oh, thanks, Stuart.
However, my own theory would be that this dagger came from a waxworks exhibition.
Oh, wrong again.
Putty is used in theatrical disguises, but I don't recall the use of colored wax.
Whereas it is used in making waxen effigies. And, of course, the dagger would belong as part of the costume.
Precisely, my dear fellow. It's a long chance, but I think in the morning we'll make a tour of the various London waxworks exhibitions. If my deduction is a false one, at least we'll have the pleasure of a busman's holiday. We can visit all our old friends who died on the gallows. Any tired, old chap?
I must say I'm a little weary. This is the 4th waxworks exhibition that we've been to.
The 4th and the last. If we fail to find any clues here at the Vex Museum, we can return to Baker Street.
Oh, thank heaven this is our last port of call. I'm so dizzy from looking at waxworks that they begin to look like human beings to me. Did you notice that I asked directions from the wax policeman at the entrance door?
Yes. I'm sure many people have been deceived in the same way. Uh-huh. Here we are.
Oh, Monsieur Levesque doesn't believe in understatement, does he? Look at that sign there.
Oh, gracious me. The Chamber of Horrors. Come in and see the pageant of murder. All the great killers of history reenacting their famous crimes. Well, let's go in, Watson. We should feel thoroughly at home.
Creepy in here, isn't it? I've heard that Mr. Levesque will pay £100 to anyone who will spend all night alone in the Chamber of Horrors.
Yes, I've heard of that challenge, too. Are you thinking of accepting the bet?
Great Scott, now I can spend a night here for £1,000.
A very comprehensive collection of killers, aren't they? Let's see, Williams, Wainwright. Ah. The Marchioness de Brinvilliers.
By George, yes. She was an attractive woman, wasn't she? As trim a pair of ankles as ever I've seen.
Yes, but you wouldn't have liked her cooking, Watson. She used the most lethal condiments of almost any woman in history. Hello.
What is it?
Look over there.
I was wondering when we'd come to one of your cases. Dr. Grimsby Rylott and the murder at Stoke Moran. Or the case of the Speckled Band. By Jove, Holmes, the tableau's extraordinarily realistic, isn't it?
Yes. One of other old friends of mine are represented here. Should rather like to renew acquaintance with Ricoletti of the Clubfoot and his abominable wife.
Ricoletti? I don't remember him, Holmes.
Oh, one of my earlier cases, old fellow. I must tell you that story sometime.
I wish you would. I'm off. Holmes, look, that veiled figure over there. Read the placard in front of it.
The Hampstead Heath murderer. Well, how very interesting.
The face is covered with a black veil.
Is this pure showmanship, I wonder, or does Monsieur Levesque know more than Scotland Yard and I?
Good day to you, gentlemen.
You startled me, sir.
Are you admiring my collection of murderers?
Monsieur Levesque?
Yes, sir. And haven't I the distinction of addressing Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
That is my name, and this is my friend, Dr. Watson.
How do you do?
How do you do, Doctor? I am greatly honored to meet you both. What do you think of my Chamber of Horrors?
Oh, it's very impressive. We're particularly interested in this veiled figure of the Hampstead Heath murderer.
Yes, indeed we are, sir. Is there a face beneath that veil?
I'll let you in on a trade secret, gentlemen. There are no recognizable features behind that veil. This is purely for publicity purposes. The public always expects to see the latest horrors here. And I thought I'd titillate their morbid palates by having a mysterious figure representing the killer. Of course, if he is captured, I shall add his effigy to my collection.
You think he will be captured, then?
One can only speculate. He's a clever man, Mr. Holmes.
By the way, Monsieur Levesque, does your offer of £100 to anyone who will spend a night in the Chamber of Horrors still hold good?
Oh, yes. Are you thinking of accepting the bet, Mr. Holmes?
No, but Dr. Watson would like to.
I don't recommend the experience, Doctor. It's an ordeal that calls for nerves of steel. However, I shall be glad to arrange for it.
I haven't the slightest intention of...
Backing down now? Of course you haven't, old fellow. What time shall my friend return, sir?
About 11:30 tonight. I'll be waiting for him at the main entrance.
Splendid. Come on, Watson.
Oh, Holmes,
Good day, Monsieur Levesque.
Good day, gentlemen. I shall be waiting for you tonight, Doctor.
Holmes, what the blazes do you think you're doing? I haven't the slightest intention of keeping that appointment tonight.
Well, of course you haven't. I shall keep it. Disguised as you.
You keep... For heaven's sake, tell me what you're up to, Holmes. You didn't even mention that missing dagger to Levesque.
No, because he knows something about the murderer. I'm convinced of it.
Well, why'd you say that?
As we were standing there talking to him, a breath of air from the open window blew back a corner of the veil. I'll swear that there are clearly defined features beneath it.
And so you're going back there tonight to find out?
That's right, old fellow. The superstitious used to believe they could use a waxen image to kill a man. Tonight, Watson, we shall prove that a waxen image can be used to trap a killer.
Dr. Watson will continue his story in just a second, so I'm just going to remind you that there are lots of ways to make good food taste better. But the easiest way is to serve that food with a good wine, a Petri wine. If you like a white wine with chicken or with fish, you'll love that wonderful Petri California Sauterne. If you like a red wine, then rich, hearty Petri California Burgundy is your wine. But if you don't know which you prefer, why not try them both? Petri Burgundy and Petri Sauterne. Red and white. Don't buy one, buy two. But always buy Petri. Well, Doctor, so Sherlock Holmes decided to disguise himself as you and spend a night in the Chamber of Horrors,
yes, Mr. Bartell, after dinner that night, he began to apply the makeup. It's uncanny to sit there in Baker Street and watch Holmes slowly turning into a very convincing replica of myself. As he did so, we discussed last-minute arrangements.
I'm promptly at 11:30, Watson. If I'm not back here by 2 o'clock, you'd better come out to me.
Well, should let me come and wait outside, old fellow. just in case there's any trouble.
No. You'd attract attention. By the way, do you recall the name of the last girl murdered on the heath?
Yes, Bishop. Rose Bishop, wasn't it?
Exactly. The only girl who was murdered when she was unescorted. The body was identified by her father.
What of it, Holmes?
Levesque is a French name, and yet the gentleman had a decidedly English accent. I should say that he adopted a foreign name as being more suited to his profession.
I don't see what you're driving at. What's the connection between Levesque, the owner of the waxworks, and the father of Rose Bishop, the murdered girl?
Levesque is the French word for bishop.
Great Scott. You think that he knows who the murderer is and...
I know only one thing, Watson. I may see it was beneath that black veil.
There. Now, how's my disguise?
Wonderful. You look exactly like me, but how do you manage about the voice?
Well, I don't think that'll be too difficult, old man. After all, Rebecca knows very well.
Oh, I can't understand half what you're saying.
In your own case, old chap, that's a handicap that I've suffered from for years.
Rubbish. I'm perfectly intelligent.
Now, let me see, the bullseye lantern. Yes. Watson, I think I'll borrow your revolver, too. I probably won't need it, but for once I think it might be safer for me to go armed.
Here, Holmes. Now, do be careful.
I will, old chap. Don't worry. Goodbye. And if I'm not back by 2 o'clock, you better come to the waxworks and see what's happened to me.
Dr. Watson, you don't mind if I search you?
Oh, gracious, Rebecca, of course not.
No lantern, please. The moonlight will give you all the illumination that you need. Oh, dear me. A revolver in your pocket. I'm afraid I can't allow that.
Oh, no.
Once before, a young man who unwisely accepted my bet left bullet holes in some of my finest waxworks before he finally went raving mad.
Gracious me, raving mad, did he? Miss Holmes, we're here.
Don't be frightened, Dr. Watson. Many of the waxwork murderers here are all friends of yours. They'll be good company. I shall come and release you at 8 in the morning.
Yes, but no. How about
Well, I've sealed all the windows with string and wax. I shall seal the door behind me as I leave.
Oh, that's very unkind of you.
Midnight. The bet it on, Doctor. You still wish to go through with it?
I suppose so.
Very well, then. I shall leave you now. Good night, Dr. Watson.
Good night.
Pleasant dreams.
Pleasant dreams. What's that? Who's there? Oh, I would have sworn I heard something spring about in the shadows. Who's come to here with me?
The window. Quick, Scott, it's Watson. Now before his time. Well, here go the seals from the string. Up with it. Holmes, are you all right? Shh. I'm all right. You came early, but it's just as well. You're carrying a lantern. Levesque took mine with him. Come on in. There we are. Quiet, open, quiet. I'm glad to see you, Watson. But what made you decide to come here so early?
Right, you left the start, came to Baker Street. He told me there was another murder on the heath at 7 o'clock tonight.
Another murder, eh?
I started worrying about you, Holmes. I had a premonition of impending danger, and I decided to come over here. You're not angry with me?
Oh, of course not, my dear fellow. I'm glad of your company, and I appreciate your concern.
Have you looked under the veil of the waxwork figure of the Hampstead Heath murderer yet?
No, I was just about to. Your lantern will be most useful. Come on, Watson.
Oh, what have you been doing? Just doing nothing?
Yes, I wanted to give Levesque an impression that I was here for the night, and I also wanted to do some serious thinking. I smoked 2 pipes on the problem, Watson, and I think I know the answer now. I'm willing to swear you'll know the face you see when I lift the veil from the waxen dummy.
It's a figure.
Now, put your lantern a little higher, will you? That's it. I lift the veil, and who do we see?
Good Lord, it's the waxwork figure of Levesque himself.
Precisely, Watson. An unparalleled example of the self-betrayal inherent in criminal egotism. Levesque couldn't resist the...
Holmes, the waxwork is moving. It's alive.
Yes, gentlemen. Which is more than either of you will be in a few minutes.
You re-entered this room by a secret door, I suppose?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. And since you've displayed such a flattering interest in the Hampstead Heath murderer, I decided to remove the wax figure and appear in person.
Look out, Holmes. You've got a revolver.
Oh, no, Doctor. This isn't a revolver in my pocket. What would the Hampstead Heath murderer want with a revolver? This is a knife. I feel so much more at home with a knife.
There are two of us, Dick. Remember that.
And both unarmed. Which one of you meddlers wants to die first? Look out, Holmes!
Watch it,
The lantern smashed. Yes, and the moon's fading. What a pity.
Holmes, where are you?
Over here by the effigy of Macbeth. How very thoughtful of you to provide him with a dagger, Lebec.
I wouldn't one, my dear Holmes. You can't escape me. I can feel my way in the dark here. I know every inch of this room. You're doomed, both of you.
Don't strike a match, Holmes. You'll make a target of yourself.
Devil with that. I'm lighting this newspaper. It'll make an excellent torch to set the light to the nearest waxwork.
No! Don't burn my waxwork!
Wax on a wooden frame should blaze brilliantly. There we are.
Oh, you devil! You're destroying my life's work!
Holmes, that burning wax is pouring all over the floor. The curtains are catching light. The whole place will burn down.
Oh, my beautiful museum!
I thought this would smoke you up. Quick, Watson, at him again.
What's that knife, Holmes?
Well, Mr. Holmes, you've done it again. You've solved the case in a blaze of glory. Get the point, sir. A blaze of glory.
Yes, Lestrade, I get the point. Thank you very much. Pass that marmalade, will you, Watson?
Holmes, is that the morning paper you brought with you, Lestrade?
Yes, Doctor. Want me to read you the headline?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Hampstead Heath murderer captured in fire that destroys waxwork exhibition. You know, Mr. Holmes, you and Doctor were lucky you weren't burned to death. Never mind the chance you ran of having your throat cut by that maniac.
It was fortunate that the police and firemen were on the scene as quickly as they were. Lebec had the strength of 10 men.
Yes, the strength of a madman. He'll never stand trial, of course.
No, Doctor. He'll end up in an asylum where he belongs. Mr. Holmes, what made you suspect Lebec?
You first gave me the clue yourself, Lestrade. You told me that all the murdered girls were accompanied by men when they were attacked. All of them save one, Rose Bishop. Therefore, if the murderer was bent by hatred of love, he had to be someone very close to Rose Bishop to know that she was a suitable victim. That point alone, which I was shockingly slow in observing, should have told us to focus our attention on the father, Mr. Bishop, alias Love.
Well, your theory was certainly right, Mr. Holmes. You should have heard his ravings after the arrest. He swore his daughter had been ruined, and so he'd killed her, too.
Holmes, the waxwork figure of the killer, the one with the veil over its face, the features underneath were those of Lebec himself, weren't they?
I'm certain of it, old fellow. You see, he had two great prides. The first, his natural pride as a fine craftsman in wax. The second, his perverted pride as a prominent and successful murderer. These two prides combined suggested to his crazed mind that he make a waxwork figure of himself and range it with the other great killers of history.
Yes, but he was cunning enough to protect himself by placing a veil over the face.
Precisely, my dear fellow. And when he saw us yesterday and we accepted the wager, he undoubtedly became suspicious and removed the wax figure last night and made his personal appearance as the murderer with every intention of killing us both. Yes, we were very lucky, old chap.
Yeah, if you ask me, Mr. Holmes, you've been very smart.
No, I quite agree, Lestrade. I think you solved the case brilliantly, Holmes.
No. I've been very sluggish. I solved by circumstance and melodrama what should have been a purely intellectual problem. I'm not pleased with myself. Lestrade, I hope that my name has not been used in that newspaper report.
No, it hasn't, sir.
Excellent. I want no credit in this case.
Oh, do you mean to say that you're going to let Scotland Yard get the praise for catching him, Holmes?
Why not?
Well, that's very generous of you, Mr. Holmes. It'll make things a lot easier for me.
Yes, it certainly will. Holmes, I can't see why you reproach yourself.
Because, my dear Watson, like the Hampstead Heath murderer, I, too, have my pride as a craftsman. This case had a clearly defined pattern, and I was unable to recognize it. If you should have occasion to chronicle this story, Watson, and I should prefer that you didn't, I would like you to entitle it The Education of an Idiot.
Oh, come now, Holmes. The education of an idiot? That's absurd.
I know. But if you do tell this story, it'll probably end up as The Strange Case of the Murderer in Wax.
Well, Doctor, that was sure a swell story. You know, that's the kind of story I like. Lots of action.
Well, that's the kind of story I like to tell. You know, Mr. Bartell, although our broadcasts were heard overseas every week through Armed Forces Radio, this is one of the few occasions that I've had the privilege of really telling my story directly to the boys. And it's been a great pleasure for me to be here at Camp Roberts.
Well, that not only goes for you, but for me too, Doctor, and for the Petrie family. There are no words to describe how much our country owes our servicemen. And to all of you, the Petrie family wants to say, just as every American wants to say, thanks for a swell job. Well, Dr. Watson, what story are you planning to tell us next week?
Next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you one of the strangest adventures that ever happened to Sherlock Holmes. It takes place in a monastery high in the mountains of Tibet and concerns itself with an avalanche, an execution, and a murder.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Adventure of the Second Stain. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petrie Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. This is Harry Bartell saying good night for the Petrie family. For a solid hour of exciting mystery dramas, listen every Monday night on most of these same stations at 8 o'clock to Michael Shayne, followed immediately by Sherlock Holmes. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
If you enjoy this podcast and are an iTunes user, please do the show a favor and head on over to the official iTunes page for Damn Good Movie Memories. Be sure to leave a rating and a review. This will allow the show to appear higher in the algorithm and spread the joy of this podcast to the masses. If you are not an iTunes user, you can still listen and subscribe on Podbean at damngoodmoviememories.podbean.com. Be sure to like us on Facebook under our Damn Good Movie Memories page. You can also listen to a limited number of episodes on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and be sure to tune in next week for an all-new episode of Damn Good Movie Memories.